From the moment that I saw King Kong, I wanted to become a filmmaker. I mean, it was as simple as that. If I hadn't happened to watch this particular movie on television as a 9-year-old, I probably today would be an architect or a plumber. I wouldn't be doing the job that I'm doing.
Working with Peter Jackson was a dream. First of all, it's a chance to work with one of the geniuses of today's cinema and an extremely passionate and talented team.
I first became aware of Michel Ansell's work last Christmas, actually, because I had a wonderful time playing one of his earlier games, Beyond Good and Evil. And I thought, wow, if somebody this imaginative can take that story and actually get me so involved in it, this is the sort of person I'd love to work with on King Kong.
Peter Jackson, il a dit, venez avec moi.
Peter Jackson said, come with me and forget about this meeting for now. And he brings us into this amazing room, a kind of creative HQ where they must have spent an enormous amount of time. And he showed us all the tons of research they had to do to prepare for the film. The artistic research, the sculptures, plans of New York, the storyboards, and he took the time to tell us the story of the film by commenting on each illustration, each image of the film. So that was the first meeting with Peter Jackson. We were speechless in discovering the universe of King Kong before anyone else, since this was in 2004. The new storyline, the incredible architecture, all the richness of the environment. He told us everything he could. So everything was very friendly from the start. And so each time that we came back to Montpellier from New Zealand, we were full of all this creativity and all this energy, which we then communicated to the other members of our team. It's exciting to go to the other side of the earth to work for one of the biggest studios in the world. And at the same time, we had to be sure we were up to par. He has a certain talent for inspiring people with his first ideas and then, afterwards, letting us do our job as the creators of video games. We really want Peter Jackson to be proud of the game. It's also a challenge from a creative point of view because we really want to make our mark on licensed games.
I think it's critical if you're making a game that is based on a movie that there's obviously incredibly close collaboration, and for us this has been really important from day one. And so we've given the Ubisoft team absolutely unlimited access to every creative aspect of our film production. We really want the game to be an absolute close brother or sister to the film. We want the two to feel like they belong in the same universe, that they come from the same creative point of view. And so we have felt that that was critical. We didn't want the jungles of Skull Island in the game to feel like a completely different jungle to the movie jungle. We wanted there to be a synergy, a creative synergy, thematic. We wanted you to feel that when you pick up this game and play it, that in some respects you're reliving part of the movie, and in fact you're expanding on the movie.
Although, I have to say, if you're playing the game, the one thing that a game can do that the film doesn't do is the tension in a game can get really intense.
I think one of the most enjoyable aspects of the game will be the sheer survival aspect, that you have to actually survive in what is probably the most dangerous jungle on Earth. And every obstacle is thrown at you, not just the physical obstacle of what the terrain of the island is like, but the creatures, the insects, the dinosaurs. You know, we think of King Kong and we think of huge gorillas and big tyrannosauruses. I mean, they're in the game, but also Skull Island has some incredibly nasty insects. It's just, it's a very, very difficult place to survive on. And so that great tension of having to figure out how you're going to survive to get the next 10 feet is going to be one of the challenges of the game.
The work we did on the directing side of Kong was quite specific, because we had to be able to juggle with different types of emotions. Sometimes it's very stressful, survival-oriented, fearful, confronting the dinosaurs, and then there's also the creating an intense relationship with the other characters, especially with Anne. You have to be able to juggle with all that so that the player goes through a whole panoply of different emotions.
I wanted the game to be able to take the audience a little bit further than what the film could. And so we explored different aspects of how you'd actually play the game. Obviously, one of the main decisions is what character you're playing. And the obvious human character is Jack, who is Adrian Brody's character. He's the lead heroic character in the film. But we also thought very early on that it would be interesting to structure the game in a very similar way to the film, which basically intercuts between Anne and Kong and Jack and the sailors who are pursuing them. I mean, the film jumps backwards and forwards between these two storylines until they intersect. And we felt it would be good to actually create a game that had a very similar structure. And we also thought it would be particularly cool to be able to play Kong. Feels like when you've got that controller in your hand, it's one thing to be obviously playing a human being, being pursued by dinosaurs, fighting dinosaurs, trying to rescue Anne, trying to find King Kong. But to actually be able to, on some levels, spin around and become Kong himself and to defend Anne against Tyrannosauruses. Because in a sense, our two characters, Jack the human and King Kong, have the same objective. They both care about Anne. Darrow, Naomi Watts' character, they both want to protect her. And so they both basically have a very similar agenda, and yet they're actually intersecting, which is going to lead to this very interesting course that the gamer is going to find themselves playing as they actually alternate between these two characters.
The context is Skull Island, an island that is hostile due to both its geography and the creatures that live on it. And the fact of having this double point of view on this universe, both from the side of the victim, Jack, the human adventurer, and the opposite side, which is that of King Kong, who has the global vision of being the king of this island. When we're Jack, we're little. We're the prey. We say, if I was Kong, I'd take care of the situation. And that's what we allow them to do in the game. And for the player, it's the big surprise in the game to all of a sudden be able to switch into another kind of gameplay, where all of a sudden we dominate over the other creatures. Now it's no longer possible to accidentally trip over or die because of some little error. We become the king of the jungle. We become King Kong. And I think that's really the high point of the game. We play alternately between one character and another. There's the character of Jack, the puny human, who's trying to survive in the jungle. And then there's Kong, who is exactly the opposite. In Kong's case, it's a combat-style game, so we tried staying as simple as possible so that in the first minute the player says, yeah, I'm the king of the jungle. All the technology is geared towards emotion, so everything is done to give us, the level designers or graphic artists, the tools to bring out those emotions. We're on an island that has to be scary, so to create that, we have to refer to what we know. We've all been scared. An image that's slightly muted to avoid the cartoon look, simple forms, a very contrasted light in certain places, and very soft in others, in order to bring out different aspects, the high spots and the low spots. King Kong isn't only a realistic game. In King Kong, the realism is there to draw the player in. Then there's the graphics for the sensitive side. With King Kong, we worked really hard on the natural elements aspect and everything that you'd find in a jungle. We worked on all the climatic effects. For example, the rain, the mist, the grass that moves dynamically with the wind, and how it moves when the characters pass by. I have to admit that even when we play a demo of the game, we don't actually know what's going to happen until it happens. We can't know why a character decides to go save another one. Maybe because he senses some kind of danger. Things that even surprise us as the developers of the game. And that's also what is so great about it, is that the player can be surprised by experimenting with King Kong. I think that the work we did on Kong took up about a third of the animation production. We really took our time with him to make sure that we incorporated every aspect of the character. Not only all his simian aspects, but also still respecting the King Kong myth. He didn't only count on his strength, but he was uncompromising in regards to his movements and energy. It's a bit like a monster truck driving through different environments. He's capable of going anywhere. It's his world. He can climb cliffs, grip onto things. He's capable of doing anything, and everything has to be done fluidly. During Kong's movements and combats, the player will be able to grab his enemies, to throw them, to use one to hit another. For example, there's an ending where Kong grabs the mouth of the T-Rex, pulls him closer, and then rips off his jaw. For each of Kong's large enemies, there's this kind of ending, but each one is different. But I'll let you see that for yourself in the game. Very quickly, the game becomes realistic, and that gave us a solid direction for the feeling of the game. So no interface. We needed to create tons of emotions, not by using cinematics, but through the sequences that the player can really play. So the gameplay is always present, and that's what also tells the story of King Kong. The fact of not using an interface was a big challenge. It was something that Michel felt very strongly about in order to add to the immersion, so we had to find other ways, like for example the breathing, or even filters that the programmers and the graphic artists experimented with. All that demanded an enormous amount of work and a lot of playtest.
It's an adventure game. You can play it full on or you can play it tactically. There are a lot of interactive elements in a given zone, so you're free to experiment with a ton of different gameplays. That's the sandbox side of it, just getting in there and having fun. I can take a spear, throw it at an enemy, or burn bushes, then go through and look for a case of ammo.
We can use the connection between the creatures of Skull Island to our advantage. For example, if I see a predator that hasn't detected me yet, I can easily attract his attention towards an animal that I had killed myself, and in doing so, turn his attention away from me so that I can get past, or simply encourage the predators to fight between themselves. For example, when I hunt, I can pick up a spear, and if I see fish or another small creature, I can stab it with the spear, and use it to attract another predator. We can attract him into a zone where there's fire, or we can also attract it into a zone where it'll want to eat or attack other creatures. So we have this control on the other creatures, which makes the universe of Skull Island much more realistic. The game is relatively instinctive and natural.
The game's difficulty automatically adapts itself to the level of the player. We detect the number of times the player dies in a given level, and if at the end of 3 deaths he's still at the same place, we put in an easier enemy to kill or reduce the number of enemies. Or for a really excellent player who, for example, is able to kill a raptor in less than 15 seconds, we can add in extra enemies so he doesn't get frustrated.
Then we went to Los Angeles with Philippa and all the actors from the film to record the voices.
I think doing a good voice for a video game that's real, that's going to work, I think is actually a real skill. And I think some actors would probably find it quite hard to do.
There's a funny story that happened with Jack Black. During the recording, we rewrote a line because he told us a story about his father. When Jack Black's father was young, he was in Africa and he was attacked by a hippopotamus. He was in the hippo's mouth, and at that moment, Jack Black's father started screaming, "God help me! God help me!" So he wanted to pay tribute to his father, who luckily came out of it alive, by saying the same thing. So we added that line into the game. The sound effects in King Kong were completely created using recordings of real-life elements. We didn't use synthetic sounds, we didn't use synthesizers. We preferred recording natural sounds ourselves and then processing them before editing them here in the studio to use as the game's sound effects. King Kong's roar is made up of over a dozen elements, and in those dozen elements, there are two that are completely human. They're human screams that have been modified, slowed down, saturated, to give the impression of size and amplitude. But at the base, the roar of King Kong is human. Chance Thomas composed the music for the game. It was then recorded in Seattle last August by a symphonic orchestra in order to stay in the natural universe of the game. What you're hearing are the bats, giant bats, flying towards us. In the game, you also come across raptors. There's a lot of velociraptors. You'll also have the T-Rex, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. And of course, you'll also have to deal with King Kong. A project like King Kong doesn't leave you indifferent, and it definitely leaves its mark. It's an enormous adventure, a human adventure when you're creating a game with a team. It's some sleepless nights, sometimes rushed deadlines, a bit of stress, a lot of organization, but it's also, and above all, a lot of memories. Memories of working with Peter Jackson, memories of the team over there and the relationships we created. It's also a lot of fun to see how film and video games are becoming more and more alike. Finally, the passion is the same. The medium may be different, but the passion is exactly the same. Working with Peter Jackson's team was amazing, fantastic, incomparable. And I'm still amazed that we were able to do all this in only a year and a half.
I really love collaborating on the game. I think really from a purely selfish point of view, it's given me a great opportunity to learn about how games are created from an incredibly successful and wonderful team of people. And, you know, I felt like a student, really, just sitting down and trying to help. I mean, I've, you know, as the guy making the movie, I've tried to offer as much advice and feedback and opinion as I possibly can. But, you know, basically the you know, Ubisoft team, with Michel Ansel at their helm, are doing just a fantastic job, and I'm you know, just playing the game, enjoying what they're showing me, and throwing them any ideas, suggestions, feedback. But it's just a wonderful experience. It's like, you know, almost making a second film at the same time as I'm making the first one. There's like two parallel productions happening at the same time, both, you know, heading towards a common goal. And I'm glad I'm only helming one of them. It'd be too much to do both.
As for me, I think it was a great adventure.